Hi, and welcome again to this latest episode of the Plata Ward 4 Update Podcast. This is David Jenkins, La Plata Town Council member from Ward 4, and your host for this podcast and video. Please note that my podcasts and videos are now available on both YouTube and YouTube Music. I hope all had a nice and safe July 4th holiday weekend, and hope you are staying safe and cool during this current heat wave. Hopefully we're going to be getting some rain, which will hopefully then give us needed water, but also drop the temperature a bit. So stay safe. So I wanted to in this episode, I wanted to do a further discussion and follow-up for my June 27th podcast about an event or a presentation I attended at the June Maryland Municipal League Conference about how Westminster Maryland was proactive in obtaining a sustainable water supply, and I'll provide a link in the notes for that. Please note, and as a background, groundwater from aquifers are both La Plata's and Charles County's primary water supply or water source. Water is regulated by withdrawal permits by the Maryland Department of the Environment through their groundwater appropriation permit process. So that both the county and the town have been working for a number of years, not only to update our current permit withdrawal process. Charles County also has an additional potential water source from the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission, WSSC, through a pipe or outfall located in the northwest portion of the county. And again, and I'll emphasize this, my comments here and my views here are mine as both one La Plata Town Council member, but also as a town resident and a taxpayer, recognizing that that is all residents in the county and in the town of La Plata, regardless of where we live, we all need to have safe and potable and sustainable water supply. Aquifers do not recognize any boundaries or political boundaries between the town of La Plata and Charles County. First, though, let me go to a presentation that was done by Charles County back in February of 2022, which gives you some background and perspective of an opportunity and a process where Charles County is working with the town to obtain a water supply. As you can see from the slide now, this is a presentation made by the acting director of planning and growth management, Jason Groth, back in February of 2022, entitled County Town La Plata Water Supply Agreement. So let's move on to the next slide. So the purpose was just to review some correspondence between the County Commissioner, President Collins, and the staff and the town to talk about how we could work together on a water sharing agreement and how we could begin to start the negotiations over as unfortunately they were bogged down. Let me go forward now to the next slide 5. And so there's been a number of studies as far back as 2015 to look at how we could interconnect small county systems south of the town, but we could connect to the town, which would provide a loop system and which provides more reliability both for water supply but also for firefighting as well. This would include extending a water main line from La Plata down to Bellotten, and also to extend a water main line from Waldorf to La Plata via St. Charles Parkway to Rosewick to Radio Station Road. So let me go to the next slide 6. And this is just a visual map or a map of how these systems would interconnect. As you can see on the top of the map, and I'll point to it in my cursor, this is St. Charles. That we would then connect a system down St. Charles Parkway to Rosewick, and then would connect to a water main line from the town in Radio Station Road, and then hopefully at some future point would extend down to Ellenwood, and also some other subdivisions south of La Plata, Newtown Village, and also as far south as Chapel Point and Bellotten. So that's a out in the future. Slide number 7 then specifically talks about a proposed water main extension down St. Charles Parkway, which is already, I believe, in place at the present time, and then would connect with a system or a water main line extending from the town along Radio Station Road and connect somewhere along either Radio Station Road or along St. Charles Parkway. So that is underway. In fact, it may have already been completed as I broadcast this video. So the next steps is to, frankly, get negotiations started again. So the county and the town, working with the Maryland Department of the Environment, we can come to a water sharing agreement where we share water systems. We have interconnections for the near future and also for the future. So unfortunately, this has not been completed at the present time, but we hope to get that started and restart it again. Now I wanted to switch gears and to really focus in on a good example of what is needed between the county and the town in terms of cooperation and partnering. This was a presentation made at the Maryland Municipal League Conference in late June of 2024, entitled Securing Sustainable Water for the Future. Let me go to the next slide, number 2. And so this was a problem they had to solve. And so they were trying to use a process where they would define the problem. You have to think big. You have to secure funding for partnering with partners to do a pilot project. And again, that later on through the pilot, and I'll get to that in a moment. The pilot then allows you to test a project for future funding with their partners for construction and engineering of a larger project. This did require state legislation because the Maryland Department of the Environment felt they didn't have the legislative power to grant this kind of work. So that required that partnership. And then finally, they had to implement the engineering and actually build the project. So let me go back. Let me show you where Westminster, if those are not familiar, that's out in Carroll County in the western part of the state. I've been to the town several times. It's a nice community, and that's where it is. The next slide kind of gives you a perspective of what their water system that's different than ours, in that the city of Westminster operates 2 water systems, and they obtain their water from 2 main sources. One is a surface, that is a lake from Cranberry and Hull Creeks that merge to form the west branch of the Patapsco River, and they have 10 groundwater wells. So they draw from a 122 million gallon raw water reservoir, which is used to supply water during rain events and to supplement their existing water sources when there's reduced flows. So let me go to the next slide. They had an issue, a water scarcity back in 2002 because of extreme drought. It got so serious that they were actually paying to have water trucked into the city. I can only imagine what that cost to do that. So they went to MDE, or MDE said, give them a consent order. In essence, you got to find a different way to provide water to the citizens of Westminster. So the town, working with the Maryland Department of the Environment, developed a system or a project called Pure Water Westminster, which is an indirect where they're going to reuse existing water. Let me go to the next slide. I have a little break here. So the problem was, you can see in this slide that what the issue is. The problem, I'm going to scroll forward a little bit to get the right slide in sequence for this. Here it is. So the problem is they want to reuse existing water, and that means providing a safe and sustainable water supply for the city of Westminster. So let me go to the next slide. Let me scroll down to this one. So they went through a process where they went through, in step 1, they had a communication plan. So they had to do the open communication from Westminster over their potential project for roughly 5 years. They worked and talked with the Johns Hopkins University, the University of Maryland College Park, and then they worked with the Maryland Department of the Environment so they could do implementation, but then they had to figure out what kind of permit that they could get. So the second step then was to do an analysis. That is, so they had to define the project scope. They needed to find a surface water discharge, indirect potable reuse. That is, in short terms, they wanted to reuse the existing water. They had to look at what those benefits were in terms of sustainability and environmental protection. This is the key point, economic growth. Again, as I said earlier, every community needs water in order to serve existing as well as future development, which spurs economic growth. They had to look at this water reuse system. They had to look at and consider potential risks to public health. They had to work through some technological issues, water source contamination, determine Maryland Department of the Environment's legal authority to give this kind of, or develop, or to give this kind of permit to them. And then finally, step 3, action. Once they, once they did all this, they then had to go back and get legislation. So they worked with their delegation to the General Assembly, their state senator, their state delegate. They drafted legislation. They introduced 2 bills, one on the Senate side, one on the House side. It was emergency legislation because they needed it ASAP. So it would be enacted shortly after the session ended. And then they had to then go back and to advocate and educate the other members of the General Assembly and the public about the environmental and sustainability benefits, the economic benefits of this passing this legislation so they could obtain water. So let me go to the next slide. So the funding of this project, this pilot project, I got the estimate from the city manager of approximately $14 million. The city obtained funding from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation for a pilot project for grant money, Environmental Protection Agency community grant. The Carroll County gave them some grants as well. And then the city of Westminster wanted to have skin in the game, so they ended up funding or submitting about $900,000 of their contribution to this pilot project. The next then was a public education campaign to work with their public relations firm to develop the logo, the literature, and videos about this project. Again, a pilot project to reuse water to obtain a sustainable water supply. They use social media, including the town's website, the city's newsletter, and then the community's water bills, kind of what we do now here in La Plata. And then at various civic events and educational events, they provided speakers to talk about it as well. Now this is the key part, what I believe, of their lessons learned for La Plata and Charles County, and what the slideshow or key takeaway. That is communication. Okay, you have to talk among the partners. That is Carroll County, Maryland Department of the Environment, the state delegation, the citizens, and of course the town, and their partners, Johns Hopkins University. That's a key element. Be very transparent. The next takeaway, number 2, partnership. And again, here they are. The City of Westminster, Maryland Department of the Environment, University of Maryland, Johns Hopkins, Maryland Municipal League helped them with the legislation. And again, here are their 2 members of the General Assembly, from the delegate and the senator. So again, it's partnership. In this case, we need partners. Charles County and La Plata in our delegation, we need to be partners in solving and fixing the water issue for our community. The third takeaway is to have flexibility. Things are not always going to go right. As they would say in the Army, Murphy's behind every tree, so things can go wrong. So you have to have a flexibility and be able to react and respond in a positive manner. So I'll go to the final slide in that. So what is the future? Well, they did get the legislation from MDE to allow them to give them permits and to regulate this permit. to do this water use project, and now they are actually are underway with a initial design of the full project, and they hope to start the design will be hopefully finished by the end of this calendar year, and then they hope to be able to have construction start in maybe late 2025 or early 2026. But again, I can't emphasize these key takeaways about communication, partnership, and flexibility in solving this problem. Now, I just found this piece of legislation most recently, House, which again is another example of regional cooperation between towns and a county. In this instance, it's Washington County. This was House Bill 1378, and this was again an urgent need for that county and the town to work in a partnership and cooperation to secure water for and I'll quote, for the mutual health and benefit of their residents. And this is what we need here in Charles County and the town of Plata. So I'm going to briefly refer to the page 1 here, the preamble. What the intent is they've had a number of water and sewer systems developed by one or more of the 9 municipalities located within Washington County. I'm sorry, I stand corrected. It's not Carroll County, it's Washington County. So there's a need to work together to solve these problems. If you look at the second whereas, these are aging systems and they lack capacity and pressures. And so therefore they are needed, cooperation is needed to fix these systems for the economic prosperity of that area. Let me go then to page number 2, under the legislative intent. I'm trying to find that real quick. The intent was to identify the impacts of the existing operational structures within the water and wastewater system in Washington County, and looking at the customer base, economic growth, and economic development, and then to identify other existing regional water and wastewater governance models to assess how different regional approaches may improve their system to provide a sustainable water supply for that part of Maryland. That is, again, Washington County. And again, they have a number of municipalities, more than we have here in Charles County. So I just wanted to get toward the end of this episode of this video by just emphasizing the importance of this cooperation. These are real-world examples and takeaways that can be and should be applied here in La Plata and Charles County, so we can work together to secure a sustainable water supply for not only our existing residents, but as the community, both communities continue to grow. So I would, so again, this is my perspective and opinion as one town council member. So my ask as I close out this video is, please engage with the town, ask your questions, provide input about this and other important issues that affect you, town residents. I would also ask you to engage with the county about this critical water issue. Their cooperation and partnership is needed so we can collectively solve and provide this public need. That is a sustainable water supply. So again, I want to thank you for listening and watching my podcast and the videos. Please stay cool and safe in this heat. And as always, please forward your comments and questions to me at my email address, djenkins@townoflaplata.org. Thanks again, and be safe.